Are there any old cemeteries near your house? I found this one in Grant County. According to this historical marker, the cemetery was used by residents of a community called Pleasant Ridge. But there doesn't seem to be a community here. The only thing left is this cemetery. I haven't found too many burials that date past the 1940s. That gives me a clue to the time when the last residents lived here. Why did the community of Pleasant Ridge disappear? It's a mystery. Let's investigate. We already know that Wisconsin people have created many different kinds of communities throughout history. Who are some of the people in your community?
Teachers, firefighters, police officers. In my community, there are a lot of nurses, neighbors, and doctors.
All my friends and family.
I wonder what kind of place Pleasant Ridge used to be. It's obvious that some big changes took place there. It makes me wonder how other Wisconsin communities have changed over time. Let's go back to Grant County and start investigating. The Grant County Historical Society operates the Cunningham Museum in Lancaster, not far from the sign and cemetery we saw. I learned that Pleasant Ridge was founded in the 1850s by an African-American farm family named Shepherd. The Green family, who came later, tried several times to escape slavery in Missouri before they succeeded and made the dangerous trip to freedom in Wisconsin. I made arrangements to meet Mrs. Mildred Green, a descendant of those people. Mrs. Green told me her ancestors settled with other escaped or recently freed slaves. That was before the Civil War ended slavery in the United States. More black people settled in nearby Cheyenne Valley in Vernon County. Those people were all farmers and found inexpensive, available land in the new state of Wisconsin. Most of them had been free for a long time and gradually moved northwestward from other states. Some white people settled in Cheyenne Valley too. Pleasant Ridge and Cheyenne Valley were farming communities, similar to others being settled in the 1850s, 60s, and 70s throughout much of southern and eastern Wisconsin. Families worked together to raise livestock and harvest vegetables and field crops. At one time, most Wisconsin people lived in rural farm communities. Although farms were often far apart, neighbors needed each other and often shared big jobs. The work got done more quickly that way and was more enjoyable. Women and girls sometimes gathered for chores like processing flax plants. The fibers were used to make linen cloth. Because neighbors knew each other so well, they helped each other during hard times. Some communities, like Pleasant Ridge, were home to just one race or ethnic group. Others, like Cheyenne Valley, attracted settlers of different backgrounds. Many people wanted to live near neighbors who spoke the same language, shared the same religious beliefs, or had the same color skin. But in remote areas, people's need to depend on each other was often more important than anything else. We know that Pleasant Ridge was established by a group of escaped and recently freed slaves who wanted to create a farming community. While most rural Wisconsin communities weren't started by black people, the Pleasant Ridge settlers had a lot in common with other farm families. What we haven't discovered yet is why Pleasant Ridge disappeared. I've learned that some of the former residents were interviewed. Maybe the recordings made of those interviews will give us a clue. I learned that Cheyenne Valley continued to grow, partially because marriage between African American people and white people was accepted in that community. but the population of Pleasant Ridge grew smaller. There was little interracial marriage there, so some residents moved to start a family. Some young people also left home to go to college or find good jobs. Remember, the Industrial Revolution created many new jobs in cities. Between the 1880s and 1920s, thousands of people left Wisconsin's farms and moved to cities. We know that thousands more emigrated from other countries, especially Germany, Poland, and Italy. What kind of communities do you think all those new residents created in Wisconsin cities? Let's go to Milwaukee, our largest city, and see what we can discover. This tourist brochure has a map that color codes Milwaukee's historic neighborhoods, but doesn't tell much about them. I was passing through this area called Lincoln Village when I spotted this beautiful church, the Basilica of St. Josaphat. In the cemetery nearby, some of the gravestones from the early 1900s have names like Kozlowski, Kaza, and Landowski. I think this must have been a Polish community. I read about an organization called Historic Milwaukee that offers tours. Let's join one. I signed up for a tour called Milwaukee's Polish Heritage. The tour guide told me that immigrants who moved here in the early 1900s created ethnic neighborhoods. People with the same ethnic or racial heritage lived in these communities. Thousands of Polish people lived in Milwaukee's South Side neighborhoods. A person walking through Milwaukee in 1900 heard many different languages spoken. Sometimes all the differences created problems for the city residents. How do you suppose people felt about the fact that some residents were rich, but many were poor? Or that some people didn't have enough food to eat or clean water to drink? People in ethnic neighborhoods organized to help each other. They created fire departments, burial companies, insurance agencies, and hospitals. They also challenged government leaders to provide services like garbage pickup and clean water. Other people worked to bring people together in new ways. The tour guide suggested I talk with Sally Wood, a food historian who collects old community cookbooks. That sounds interesting. Miss Wood showed me several different community cookbooks, including one that was first published in 1901 at a place called the Settlement in Milwaukee. She told me that the Settlement was a place where European immigrants could take classes in English and citizenship and learn to sew and cook. Their cookbook reflects Milwaukee's cultural diversity. For example, even the pancake section has recipes from many different cultures. We tried out the matzo meal pancakes. What can we learn from old recipe collections like the Settlement Cookbook?
We can learn many things, but basically we learn how different ethnic groups put foods together using the same basic ingredients and come up with totally different dishes in the end.
The Settlement Cookbook was revised many times over the years. At the same time, neighborhoods in Milwaukee changed as young people moved away and new immigrants arrived. And Mrs. Green told me that the community of Pleasant Ridge changed too. But the people still living there valued their community life. They built a community center where neighbors held picnics. Every summer they had a reunion there, and friends and relatives who had moved to other cities came home. Those reunions continued until the 1940s. By then, most of the older people in Pleasant Ridge had died. The younger people had moved on, and no one new settled there. So that's why there isn't much left to see in Pleasant Ridge. We solved that mystery. At the same time that Pleasant Ridge ceased to exist, new communities called suburbs were created. Suburbs grew quickly in the 1940s and 50s. People lived in the suburbs and commuted on new highways to work in the city. These new communities weren't rural, like Pleasant Ridge, or urban, like Milwaukee's ethnic neighborhoods. How do you think life changed for the families who moved to the suburbs? Workers spent more time driving to work, and so had less time to spend with their families. They often didn't know their neighbors well, or rely on them to help with essential chores. New groups of people moved into some of the old city neighborhoods. A Latino community is growing near the Basilica of St. Joseph's, and many more African Americans live in Milwaukee than did a century ago. After our investigation, it's clear to me that all communities change over time. Some, like Pleasant Ridge, disappear altogether. Others change in different ways. But cemeteries, photographs, oral history, architecture, and even old recipes help us understand Wisconsin's historical communities and the people who lived in them. People within communities sometimes disagree and have to work out conflicts, but in times of real trouble, people often pull together and help their neighbors, even if they don't know them very well. We've talked a lot today about communities as places where people live, but communities can also mean groups of people. We can define communities as groups of people having something in common. People of a certain ethnic or cultural heritage, for example, have some bonds with others of the same heritage, even if they don't live close together. I'm a member of lots of communities: my hometown, my school community, the Italian-American community, and the history detective community. How about you?
I play the violin in the orchestra, so I'm in the music community.
I am part of the Boys and Girls Club community.
I'm a Packer fan.
And I am a member of my church.
I'm part of a Little League team.
I am a member of my family.
Wisconsin is, and has been, made up of many different communities. And you belong to a lot of those communities. As we grow and change, we sometimes need to join or create new communities. But no matter what else changes, we all need a place to belong. The communities we belong to have a lot to do with who we are. To learn more about one of my first communities, I got permission to investigate the cemetery in my hometown. I wanted to find one of the oldest gravestones and see if some of the names provide clues to the people's ethnic background. You can search for clues about historic communities by studying the architecture in your neighborhood, or examining old photos on display at a local museum. Or maybe you can find a cookbook written about your community and ask an adult to help you try a recipe. Or maybe you can ask about making a gravestone rubbing in an old cemetery in your hometown. See you next time.